Welcome to a place where midnight knocks shatter silence, where perfect marriages splinter to reveal mistresses hiding in the shadows, and where every secret comes with a price. Here, loyalty is traded for lust, and behind closed doors, masks fall to expose husbands who live double lives dripping with lies. These aren't just stories, they're confessions of betrayal that carve scars across generations. Families once united by love find themselves bound instead by rage, plotting justice that only blood ties can deliver. And when hidden bank accounts, late-night calls, and secret promises finally collapse, they take down men who believed themselves untouchable. What begins with tears at 1 a.m. always ends with a storm no one can escape. Stay with us as we uncover shocking betrayals, raw emotions, and unforgettable stories where revenge is never a choice, it's destiny. At exactly 1 a.m., the silence was ripped apart by a desperate pounding on the door. The sound was sharp, uneven, filled with the kind of urgency that makes the body freeze before the mind even understands. When the door opened, the night air carried in a sight that stole every breath. Crumpled on the floor, bruised and trembling, lay the daughter once believed to be cherished. Her hair was tangled, her lips swollen, and the tears streaking her face told a story that words could not yet form. In that moment, time fractured. The man she had married, the man who stood before friends and family and promised to protect her, had instead become the reason she collapsed at the threshold of her own blood. His violence was no accident. His fists had delivered a truth the family had tried so hard to ignore. The truth of his mistress, his lies, his betrayal. The bruises on her arms were not just bruises. They were confessions written on her skin. Every mark screamed the same word, betrayal, and beneath the surface, rage brewed. What sort of man trades vows for violence? What kind of husband lays hands on the woman who trusted him with her life? The neighbors had whispered for months about the late-night phone calls, the expensive gifts with no receipts, the way his eyes wandered when she wasn't looking. He laughed it off, playing the part of the perfect husband while hiding his mistress behind carefully staged lies. That illusion shattered with the force of his blows, and now the truth lay bleeding at the family's feet. A decision took root in the silence that followed. No more excuses, no more second chances. He had crossed a line that could never be erased. The daughter's pain was only part of the story. The rest was hidden beneath bank statements, secret accounts, and whispered promises to another woman. He thought no one would discover the trail of deceit, but he underestimated the strength of the very family he tried to humiliate. Each sob, each broken gasp of breath fed the fire burning inside. It was not only about her suffering, it was about the disgrace he brought into the home, the lies that corroded trust, the way he mocked the family's dignity with his double life. When she was lifted from the floor, fragile and broken, the vow was made in silence. He would pay. He would learn what it meant to wound what could never be replaced. He would come to understand that betrayal has a cost far greater than he ever imagined, and that cost would be exacted not by strangers, but by the very ones he thought too loyal to turn against him. The night he sent her crashing to the door was the same night he opened the door for his own downfall. The picture had always been perfect. Smiles polished for family gatherings, laughter rehearsed for neighbors, hands held tightly in public as though nothing in the world could fracture their bond. People admired them, envied them even. They whispered about the strength of their marriage, about how lucky she was to have a man so devoted, so charming. But perfection has a way of cracking under its own weight, and when it broke, it shattered with a force no one could ignore. The truth arrived not through gossip, but through bruises. His fists carried more honesty than his lips ever had. For months, there had been whispers of another woman, but rumors are easy to deny when the façade is so carefully built. He made sure everyone saw the devoted husband, the attentive son-in-law, the man who never strayed. Yet behind closed doors, his mistress became his obsession, and the rage he could not unleash on her spilled onto the one who wore his ring. It is one thing to betray a vow in secret. It is another to let the cruelty bleed into the home. His hands, once placed on her with tenderness, now struck with the force of all the lies he had woven. Each blow was a confession. Each bruise was proof of the double life he had been living. He did not just break promises. He broke the very illusion of the man he pretended to be. The neighbors who praised their marriage could not see the way his eyes lingered on his phone at night, could not hear the muffled calls behind locked doors, could not smell the perfume that clung faintly to his clothes when he returned late. For so long, it was easier to believe in the performance, easier to protect the image of a happy home. But when blood stained the silence and her body collapsed beneath the weight of his violence, no rumor was needed. The truth stood naked and undeniable. The perfect marriage was nothing but a stage play, and the curtain had finally fallen. His mistress was not just a shadow in the background. She was the poison that unraveled the family thread by thread. And yet, he underestimated the cost of dragging his deceit into the light. He believed his charm would shield him, that silence would keep him safe. He was wrong. What he failed to see was that betrayal has a way of uniting those it wounds. Secrets have a way of demanding revenge, and once the mask slipped, there was no going back to the life he had so carefully staged. He had written the script with lies, but it would not be him who dictated the ending. The day he raised his hand was the day he signed his own downfall. Behind closed doors, the story was not the one painted for the world. The smiling photographs, the polite conversations at dinner parties, the steady hand resting on her back in public, all of it was a costume. When the doors shut and the lights dimmed, the man who called himself husband revealed the truth no one dared imagine. Loyalty was never his gift, lust was his compass. Every promise spoken at the altar had been bartered away for fleeting nights with a mistress who laughed at vows and whispered encouragements to betrayal. The family believed in him. He was the one who fixed things when they broke, the one who carried groceries in from the car, the one who knew how to win hearts with his charm. But charm fades fast when bruises tell the real story. He was not a protector, not a partner. He was selfishness carved into human form, violence hidden behind a practiced smile. Each word he spoke outside the home rang hollow once the truth surfaced inside it. The daughter learned too late that his affection was only a mask. Nights spent waiting for him to return turned into mornings of lies. Business trips were nothing but escapes into the arms of another woman. The phone he guarded so closely was not a tool of work, but a vessel of secrets. Messages filled with promises to someone else, money transferred quietly, hotel bills tucked away. It was not just infidelity, it was a life built entirely on deception. When the truth surfaced, it did not come gently. It came in the form of raised hands, of a body crumpled to the ground, of tears choking the air. Violence is the language of cowards, and his actions spoke louder than every excuse he had rehearsed. He wanted control, but instead he revealed the ugliness he had tried so hard to hide. The family that once welcomed him now saw him clearly. There was no husband, no partner, no son-in-law worth defending. Only a man who fed on lies and left destruction in his wake. Anger burned through every corner of the home. The betrayal was not his alone. It bled into everyone he had deceived. He thought his secrets would stay buried, but secrets have a way of clawing to the surface, demanding air. He believed lust was worth more than loyalty, that violence would silence questions, that selfishness would never be punished. But he was wrong. What he failed to understand was that betrayal has consequences, and the family he underestimated was far stronger than the lies he spun. He had written his story in deceit, but the ending would not belong to him. The night his true face was revealed was the night his downfall began. Every betrayal carries a price, but some debts cannot be paid with apologies or tears. This one carved scars so deep they stretched beyond one night, beyond one broken marriage, cutting into the very heart of a family that once knew nothing but warmth. The same table that had been filled with laughter, with shared meals, with the comfort of togetherness, now sat cold, heavy with silence. Rage had taken the place of joy, and in that silence a vow was born. Justice would be delivered, and it would not come from strangers. It would come from blood, from those who had suffered his lies and would no longer bear the weight of them. The man who once sat at that table as though he belonged had shattered everything. His betrayal was not just an affair. It was violence, deceit, and the reckless destruction of trust. Generations felt the ripple. The daughter bore the bruises on her skin, but the parents bore the wounds in their hearts, knowing they had welcomed a wolf into their home. The children yet to grow in that house would one day hear the story of how he tore it apart. Betrayal is not a single act. It echoes through years, through lives, poisoning everything it touches. He thought fists would silence her. He thought secrecy would shield him. But nothing is hidden forever, and nothing angers a family more than realizing their kindness was used as a weapon against them. The very people who once supported him now turned inward, gathering strength from the rage he had ignited. Plans began to form, quiet at first, whispered in corners, exchanged in glances heavy with meaning. Justice was no longer a word spoken in hope. It became a living thing, pulsing in every breath, waiting for the moment to strike. The house itself seemed to remember. Every chair he sat in, every wall that absorbed his laughter, now carried the stain of his betrayal. The home no longer welcomed him, it rejected him. The family that once bent over backward to keep peace now prepared to bend him beneath the weight of truth. His lies had been his weapon, but truth would be his undoing. There was no forgiveness left, only calculation. Every hidden bank slip, every whispered call, every bruise he left behind became evidence, ammunition. He had underestimated the bond of family, believing loyalty could be fractured by his deceit. But he was wrong. When blood unites in rage, it is not easily broken. The warmth that once filled the home was gone, but in its place stood something unshakable: resolve. His betrayal had written the story, but the family would write the ending. The night he turned love into violence was the night the family began plotting his reckoning. A mistress was not the only thing he buried in silence. Lust was only one layer of the rot he carried into the family. Beneath it lay something colder, calculated, and deliberate. Bank accounts hidden under different names, transactions that bled money from the household, late-night calls that were never about work, but about securing the double life he built with steady hands. Each secret promise he made to another woman was paid for with stolen trust and stolen dollars, and he thought no one would ever see past the mask he wore so well. He carried himself like a man beyond consequence. The perfect husband in public, the attentive son-in-law at family dinners, the charming neighbor who never failed to smile. But charm has an expiration date, and his lies grew too heavy to stay buried. Receipts tucked away in his wall, it began to surface. Unexplained withdrawals carved holes into accounts, and his phone lit up with calls at hours when only deceit prowls. He thought shadows would protect him, but shadows betray their owners when light is finally turned on them. The discovery came in fragments at first. A statement with charges no one could explain. A name that appeared too often, too intimately, in his call logs. A promise written in a message not meant for the eyes of the family he betrayed. Piece by piece, the web he spun began to unravel, each strand revealing not just betrayal but strategy. A life being prepared outside of the marriage, as if the vows he once made had expired long ago. What he underestimated was the strength of silence. He mistook it for ignorance, never realizing it was patience. While he continued his game, those he wronged were already watching, already piecing together the puzzle he believed would remain unsolved. The rage was not wild or reckless. It was quiet, sharp, and steady. Every secret uncovered became fuel for the reckoning that was waiting for him. His violence had already proven what kind of man he was. The bruises on her skin told truths his words never could. But discovering the hidden accounts, the whispered calls, the stolen promises, it turned anger into resolve. This was not only about broken love or betrayal of flesh. It was about the systematic destruction of a family, orchestrated by the very man who claimed to lead it. When the confrontation came, it was not with screams. It was with evidence laid bare, the kind of proof no lie could erase. He had built his life on deceit, but he was never untouchable. He was a man undone by his own arrogance, stripped of the control he clung to so tightly. The night his web of silence collapsed was the night his power ended. What began with tears at 1 a.m. would not end in silence. That night was the birth of something stronger than grief, stronger than shame. Every sob carried a weight that settled deep within the family, every bruise etched into memory like a vow. There was no more denial, no more clinging to the illusion of love. What had been broken at the door that night was more than a body. It was trust, and with it, the mask of a man who thought himself untouchable. The plans started quietly, whispered between breaths, exchanged with looks that carried more meaning than words. Rage did not roar, it simmered. Each day that passed built resolve, each sleepless night adding fuel to the storm that was gathering. He believed his lies still held power, believed his fists still carried fear, but he mistook patience for weakness. What he never understood was that betrayal does not fade. It transforms, sharpening into something unbreakable. Every unspoken vow formed in those long nights was a thread in a story he would not control. The family that once welcomed him with open arms now plotted with steady hearts, binding themselves together in the name of justice. There was no outsider to call upon, no stranger to set things right. This was their fight, their wound, their honor to reclaim. And when family unites under the weight of betrayal, the reckoning that follows is inevitable. His mistress was only a piece of the puzzle. The late night calls, the stolen money, the hidden accounts. Each revelation pulled him closer to the edge. The violence that sent her crashing to the floor was not a single act, but the climax of years of deceit. And now it demanded a price. He thought charm could shield him, that silence could protect him, but silence had already turned against him. It listened, it remembered, and it carried his sins back to those he had tried to fool. The storm grew in secret, but he walked blind into it, never seeing the shift in the eyes around him, never noticing how the warmth he once relied on had been replaced with steel. Each moment he believed himself safe was another step closer to his downfall. His arrogance was his greatest ally, and it became his undoing. The family did not wait for fate to act. They became fate. They became the storm he could not escape, the reckoning he never thought possible. He had carved wounds into their lives, but they would carve his name into ruin. The night that began with tears ended with vengeance, and from that storm there was no shelter. Thank you for stepping into these stories where truth cuts sharper than rumor, and betrayal always carries a price. If you are gripped by the secrets, the lies, and the storms that follow, don't leave just yet. There's so much more to uncover. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next shocking twist. Here, every secret will surface, every lie will unravel, and every betrayal will be punished. Until next time, stay watchful, because the darkest truths always knock when you least expect it.